I'm a piano. It's a big vibe, but the girls them know. Steadily, heavily. I'm a piano. It's a big vibe, but the girls them know. They see me coming, them they shout hallelujah. Every day it be like a new year. Overseas they want chop me like suya. Omo I know beat dog for this dunya. Tire so greasy, he dey dance like Chris Breezy, easy. Omo my wrist, they cold, they freeze you. Them know they call me Mr. Money for no reason. I see they go, I'm a piano. We go show, we go let them know. Now we dey run the town and any show bigger than any woe, stronger than any foe. Bad man flows, put them on their toes. On the low, the girl them know. My bed is short, South Jammu, Colorado. Pass me the party don't go. Piano, it's a big vibe, but the girls them know. Steadily, heavily. I'm a piano, it's a big vibe, but the girls them know.
Yeah, what you call? Ọkọ̀ ní gíràn. Bad bitches want to wọlé ṣẹ́rí wọn. Turn me up, oya carry on. Shake your caravan for the Don Corleone. What the fuck? Get it on the floor. I can never fall. RIP to 44. I'm trading all of my soul now for my peace. I'm glad I made it out of belly and peace. From the ground up, niggas stand up, see the phantom, no need to random, but we done shut down, and then they never done. I'm telling y'all, better get the memorandum.
You know, I do what I can. So, today I'm joined by a special guest, I guess you could say.
Ain't nobody.
No, you somebody, because as the creator of the We Need to Talk platform, you're literally like the perfect person to have this conversation. For y'all who don't know, this is Allen O.V. He is the host, creator, everything extraordinaire, director, producer of some of the viral content you may have been seeing coming from the We Need to Talk YouTube channel. And he also happens to be 100% Nigerian. What tribe?
Igbo.
Okay.
I'm Igbo.
All right,
Born and partially raised.
Yeah. So we can't, ironically, talk about, this rise of African music, even South African and Amapiano music, without talking about Nigeria. And that's a little bit awkward because, there are some tensions between South Africans and Nigerians because of this. But, it is what it is. Nigerians are a prolific people, a great people. So, how do you feel about the opportunity that's presented for everything that's going on in music right now as it pertains to Nigeria?
I think music is a bridge, right? When I first came to this country, and this is true for a lot of Nigerians who were born in Nigeria, Afrobeats wasn't cool, right? The way that we dressed wasn't cool, so we kind of had to hide it, right? So it's been interesting to see the transition where people know Burna Boy and people know Asake and Kiss Daniels and people like that. And now, because of the music, they want to know more about Africa, right? And they want to think past the stereotypes, the huts and all that good stuff. So, yeah, it's a bridge, and I also think it's a bridge within Africa as well, right? Because South African Amapiano is inspiring Afrobeats, Nigerians Afrobeats, and Ghanaians Afrobeats, and vice versa too. So that's been really cool to see.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we forget in these kind of tribal wars that we are prone to, we forget that there's a long lineage of borrowing, in art period, but amongst African people, specifically, and amongst just black music in general. You can't talk about, the James Brown, you can't talk about the jazz greats like Miles Davis, you can't talk about spirituals and slave hymns without being able to make a direct anthropological link back to the music, the dance, and the style of Africa. And it's just wild to me that there's even a conversation or a debate right now as to whether Black Americans are even truly African, by descent, which is just how do you come to that conclusion when we can literally see ourselves in each other. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about this kind of, I know there's a diaspora war in general amongst everybody, but our specific African American brand, if I'm even allowed to give it that title, it's kind of wild right now. How do you feel about that? Our identity crisis right now.
Yeah, I think it's a consequence of when you disconnect people from where they're from, right? Because there's a I guess cohort of African Americans who think that they've been here the entire time. They're Native Americans. There's a cohort that only thinks about Kemet and Egypt, right? And then there's a cohort who thinks about West Africa. And then there's a cohort, the FBAs, who only think about history starting from enslavement, right? So unfortunately, I think one of the consequences of our culture, we tend to fracture ourselves into smaller and smaller subgroups. Even in Nigeria, like I said, Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, even within Igbo culture, you have Ibibise, they are like this, and people from this place are like that.
Giving a little accent, okay, I believe you now. I believe you.
So I mean, I think that's one of the things, independent of white people and white supremacy's influence, we have to look at like our reflex to want to break ourselves apart into smaller and smaller pieces that are less capable of fending off oppression and collaborating and building anything that's sustainable.
Hey. I can catch the Holy Ghost off that. And for me, that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
You know, just to speak for myself, when I hear Afrobeat, when I hear piano, when I hear African house music, when I hear Habesha music from Ethiopia, I feel something. And, you know, my personal journey with, you know, trying to figure out who I am, you know, started very young. And I always find myself, you know, attracted to all things African culture and studying things African culture. And because of that, I consider myself what I call a classical Afrocentrist, meaning it's not just about the aesthetic, but it's about truly having African-centered thinking, which I would summarize with the model of the village. In the village, everybody has a role. In the village, there are gender roles. In the village, there is a way that we train our boys and our girls so that when they come of age, they have the opportunity to prove themselves worthy of being a leader, a husband, a wife, a mother, a father, a warrior in that community. And for me, that's the most terrible thing that we lost. And so I think everybody kind of knows the African American side of the story on that. But what about on, you know, your side of the ocean? Do you feel like what do you feel like are some of the effects of that colonialism and just the exploitation of the mineral wealth of Africa, and how that has impacted the ability for African men and women to pair well together, to build strong families, to build strong institutions, to kind of carry Africa forward out of, you know, this era, this new era where we're looking to break the shackles of colonialism? What do you feel like are some of you guys' barriers that you face because of all this?
I think the first mineral resource that we lost is human capital, right? So one of the conversations I'm interested in having is, you know, the diaspora and what responsibility or what role does the African diaspora play in Africa's liberation, right? But secondarily, I mean, even in Nigeria, we export tomatoes and import tomato paste. We export fruits and import fruit juice, right? So our mindset on the ground is more so Eurocentric than Afrocentric. And that's one thing that I think is not talked about often as a difference between Africans and African Americans. I think African Americans on average are far more Afrocentric minded than Africans. And I think it's because colonialism is like being trapped in your basement, whereas enslavement is like being trapped in somebody else's. So you guys are more familiar with what white supremacy is on average than we are. And I think it's something that needs to be addressed. But the other piece too is because of that, we don't have there's no African dream, like the American dream, white picket fence, 2.5 kids, all that good stuff. The African dream tends to be to leave Africa, right? And until we start addressing that from a philosophical, from a cultural, anthropological standpoint, we will continue to be ripe for Western exploitation. So I think it starts with us, and I think that's usually an unpopular opinion, but it starts with our thinking.
I'm gonna have to say I agree with you. When the pandemic hit, that was kind of a turning point for me, because it brought it into my awareness, like, if everything goes to shit in my immediate environment, I have no protection. I have no place out in the woods that I can go, and I know that there's a village of people who will protect me. I have no recourse. I can't even, if the store's shut down, I can't eat. So my mind shifted, like, almost intuitively to, okay, maybe it's time to reconnect, to Africa, because to me, as far as I'm concerned, Africa is the future that Black people need to be looking at. We need to be making very conscientious efforts to link up with you guys, because it's like they say, there is no African America. So there's no seat in the United Nations that has African America on the tag, but there is a Nigeria, there's a Ghana, there's a South Africa, there's a Dominican Republic of Congo, so I would, even though I equally identify as a foundational Black American because I'm a descendant of slaves, I equally identify as a descendant of West Africa. I equally identify as, someone who has ancestry native to this land, because I do have all of those things in my bloodline. But it's very difficult for me to try to pick a side, because it's like that. Why make that a weakness when it can be a strength, And for me, the music encapsulates that in a way that we can all connect to. Because when you hear that beat and you start moving, you don't have any control over that. At that point, we are literally all in unison. And I feel like there's an opportunity there. And I'd like to see kind of where we can take that. And I've heard you talk about the idea that we need to rethink, and maybe even recreate some of our, like, what code are we going to live by? What is our culture? It behooves us to think about how the music plays into that, the messages we're sending in the music, the way we do festivals and shows, and how we use that as a catalyst to do the work we need to be doing moving forward. So what I would like to ask you is, do you see a golden opportunity that this moment has created? Do you see, because the music industry right now in Africa is totally run by, like, the young people of Africa. It is their movement, and I feel like there's an opportunity for there to pull in resources, to build institution. Where are your thoughts on how that connects?
One of the things that disappointed me recently was when Burna Boy won a Grammy. To see how much it validated him as an artist and how much it validates our artists was disappointing, right? And I'm torn because I don't blame him, because from a musical standpoint, that is the height of achievement. However, as long as white folks keep making the rules, keep making the benchmarks, keep making the trophies, whatever we're talking about is going to kind of be superficial, right? And, I always kind of go back to the Berlin Conference. Whiteness wasn't created from love. It was created from necessity, right? Blackness, on the other hand, was created as a response to whiteness, but founded in love. And I think maybe we should reapproach how sustainable it is, how effective it is in actually maintaining our solidarity, right? Because if we continue to rely on Nigerians liking Ghanaians liking South Africans, then our productivity is going to kind of go like this, because human beings were. But if we can kind of calibrate ourselves on something that's central, that is kind of unattached to how we feel about each other, I think we can do some stuff in reshaping and creating that African dream, that African vision, that isn't our musicians wearing Louis Vuitton and wearing diamonds and leaning into an aesthetic that celebrates capitalism, that is truly African, right? And I don't think we're there yet, but I think this is a start. And I think if we keep going in this direction and we keep encouraging artists who are conscious, we will see more conscious artists sending conscious messages to create a more, conscious zeitgeist.
That's real. We talked about a lot, and we talked about the things that represent opportunity for us to come together. Whether that's the way that the world is kind of gravitating towards African music right now is very similar to the way the world gravitated towards like hip hop and funk and all those things. And that gravitation includes Africans from the continent emulating a lot of what they see, which can be good, it can be bad, but at the very least now we have a common thread in popular culture to start with. So I think that's an opportunity. However, there are some barriers that we face in our attempt to unify, in our attempt to move forward into that African dream. So what do you feel like is the biggest barrier that we should kind of think about as we approach this?
I give you two. The first one is culture, and it sounds counterintuitive, but as an African, and most Africans might not admit this, our culture is fundamentally flawed. The way that it's exclusionary of our own people, right? The way that it's embracing of other people, right? Like right now, I think in Nigeria, expats make more than the country that they're in's counterpart, right? Mm-hmm. So an engineer from America is going to make more than an engineer in Nigeria, whereas the engineer in Nigeria was probably a higher position in his class than the engineer from America, but because he's coming from a more established place, he's more competent, right? And I think a lot of that is baked into the inherent generosity of our culture, right? The fact that we want to give. Even Mansa Musa is walking around giving people gold. I think he made Africa a target, but that's another conversation. But anyway, the next thing I would say is we tend to be very zealous religious people, and I think it's rooted in our more traditional religions. And I think in that sense, we were ripe for the picking when Christianity and Islam was brought over. So I think we need to reinvestigate like how practical we are as a people. And the reason it's such a complicated conversation is because for instance, when you study religions that were created in the United States, there's a correlation between when those religions sprung up and the socio-economic state of the country at the time. And the correlation tends to be when shit is going really, really bad, that's when religions happen, mm-hmm. right? Now, from an African context, from a Nigerian context, Surulere or Juelegba, places like that, shit is always going bad. So religion tends to be the only thing you have to lean on, and I think that's part of the reason people are so zealous. I was watching a documentary about TB Joshua. Dude was running a cult, basically. His church is still around, even though he passed. But when you come into a community, or you come from a community where like people are sick, people are poor, people are starving, all they can do is look up, right? Whereas in the West, when there aren't as many like, or even like places like Russia, there aren't as many like level 1 Maslow's hierarchy of needs problems, people now have to look at self, right? And sometimes that's a more productive paradigm. So that's a very long, difficult, hard conversation that I don't know if we'll be ready to have in my lifetime, but I think we should consider it.
Yeah. I like the way you frame that as you got to start at the bottom of the Maslow's. You can't be talking about, yeah, we're going to take over the world and your people can't
hungry,
eat,
right.
you know. Right. So that gives us a lot.
And I say all the time too, like, morality doesn't exist at the bottom of the pyramid. If I'm hungry and you're hungry, it's every man for himself, right? So from a Western perspective, let's say I was the king of the United Kingdom or whatever the case may be. My goal would be to keep these people hungry, right? Because if they're hungry, they're easier to exploit, they're easier to control, they're easier to pit against one another. So there's no reason for the Congo's resources to be adequately distributed or paid for, like paying a fair wage. There's no, because if I can keep these people really, really rich, keep these people really, really poor, they'll fight amongst themselves and I can do what I need to do, right? And until the really, really rich and the really, really poor start seeing that, I mean, there are places in Nigeria where the only road is from the airport to the rich guy's house. That's the only road. Whereas everybody else doesn't even have light switches in their house, right? And then, we want to talk about the Yahoo boys and the scammer emails and the shawos and things like that without addressing the fact that we're keeping people in lack. We're keeping people in a state of what's the opposite of abundance? Depravity, right? So they can't think rationally, and then they have to go to the church to seek absolution because you can't be a good person. Vicious cycle.
And I imagine that has to be, because I hear a lot of African men complain about all African women are gold diggers.
It's a consequence.
You understand? I hear a lot of African women talking about the fact that African men are not emotionally present. They only worry about working money. It makes sense.
Consequence.
Makes sense. So to close us out, man, first of all, thank you for having this conversation with me. I think it's important. I think it gives people a lot to think about. And if you like what you heard here, please know that you can check this brother out on a regular basis. His Instagram is up. His YouTube is lit. That is at WNT Talk. We need to talk on pretty much all social platforms. So, I'm gonna ask you 2 questions.
Okay.
Any final words you have for the people, and give me your favorite Afrobeat on a piano song out right now, and that's how we're gonna take them out.
I think we need to start thinking about what is our dream, right? As Africans, as Black folks, and what is a non-superficial dream? Because I think a lot of our dreams tend to be very superficial, which tends to be capitalist, which is inherently a white dream, right? Mm-hmm. So if we are externally Black but internally white, we're wasting our time, and we'll continue to mine our resources, whether external or internal, for them.
Stop dreaming another man's dream.
Stop dreaming another man's dream.
And somehow find it in you to dream your dream, because without dreams we can't create. a Future song.
Right.
I like that. I like that.
My song, right?
Give me a song, man. What is it?
Some of us too busy to be there.
Hey, whoa! Why can I can't play
Kinda
that.
toxic, man.
It's counterproductive. You're not too busy. We gotta get y'all married off and building strong families and such.
I'm still an African man, and I gotta get the money. You know what I'm saying?
All right, here we go. Kiss Daniel. Some of us are too busy to be back. All right, here we go.
That was good.
Yeah,
That was good.
that wasn't bad.
Some of us too busy to be back.
If you are there, you know. Rugged, hype.
1, 2, 3.
When I go, girl, I no go return. And in one night, girl, no it on. Relationship be like job. And I no get to see you at all. And you know about though, I'm a ton. I'm a wakushi low ton. But the lamb and a ton by ton. You have to wait till you reach your turn again. My head they hurt, my brain they touch. They don't use me back, so no time for love. I be bad boy too far. Baby, stand up, move on, a new girl is coming. And your presence is stalling. Stop playing, I see go love you money. If not be Jesus is coming, I know I'm born again. Yeah.